Evan had seen war. He had fought in the trenches of Earth's most brutal conflicts, faced enemies that could melt a man's flesh with a mere glance, and survived battles on worlds where gravity was a weapon. But even after all that, nothing had prepared him for the alien swampland he had purchased for pennies. It was a story that began with an impulsive decision. After retiring from the intergalactic army, Evan had spent months in deep contemplation, wondering where his place in the universe was. The stars had lost their shine, and the battles, the endless wars, had dulled his soul. Then came the offer, a real estate auction for swampland on a forgotten planet in the Vorkuth system. The land was cheap, ridiculously cheap, and for a man who'd lost everything, a new start seemed like the only thing left to grasp. The swamp, designated as XY9, was a desolate, inhospitable place. Its atmosphere was thick with greenish mist, the kind that made your skin crawl as it stung the eyes. The air reeked of decaying plant life, and the surface was a soggy wasteland of tangled roots and stagnant pools. Most humans considered the planet a write-off, but Evan, with his soldier's mindset, saw it differently. He saw a place to rebuild, to start fresh. Elizabeth, his old comrade and now a retired officer herself, had tried to talk him out of it. "This isn't Earth, Evan," she warned, her voice tight with concern. "You can't fight everything in this galaxy, and not all wars are worth winning." But Evan was resolute. The swampland would be his sanctuary, a quiet retreat far from the chaos of intergalactic politics. And besides, he had learned long ago that life was never about avoiding challenges. It was about surviving them. The first week in the swamp was uneventful. Evan spent his days scouting the land, setting up camp, and figuring out how to make the most of the terrain. He planted basic crops, a few hardy species that would grow in the thick, acidic soil. The nights were quiet, save for the strange croaking noises that echoed through the mist. It was the creatures that lived beneath the surface of the swamp that Evan hadn't counted on. His first encounter was at dawn on the second week. As he wandered the marshlands, setting up traps for food, a ripple in the water caught his attention. It was large, far larger than anything he had expected. The ground shook slightly as something massive stirred beneath the murky water. A long, sinuous shape rose from the depths, a beast that could have been a nightmare pulled straight from a soldier's worst fears. It had translucent skin, giving it an eerie, ghostly appearance, and jaws that were capable of snapping a man's leg in half with one bite. Evan barely managed to evade its first strike, his military instincts kicking in as he rolled to the side and drew his plasma blade. The creature recoiled, letting out a blood-curdling screech, but it wasn't finished. It circled him, testing the waters for another strike. Evan didn't hesitate. With a burst of adrenaline, he charged, slicing through the creature's side and sending it, thrashing back into the water with a roar. The fight left him with more questions than answers. What other creatures lurked in the murky depths of XY9, and why had no one told him about them? Days passed, and Evan faced more and more creatures. Some were like the first, large, predatory, and deadly. Others were smaller but no less dangerous. Alien amphibians, giant slugs, and strange insectoid creatures made his every step a calculated risk. Each victory against the beasts felt like a hollow one. His sanctuary was becoming a battlefield, and the swamp seemed to grow more hostile with each passing day. It didn't take long for word to spread. Elizabeth was the first to arrive, a flash of concern on her face as she disembarked from her small shuttle. "Evan, what the hell's going on here? This isn't just a swamp. It's a war zone." He stood near the edge of the swamp, blood still on his armor from his latest encounter with a massive venomous reptile. "I've been fighting these creatures for weeks, Liz. I've got the scars to prove it." He wiped his brow, frustration evident in his voice. "But no one told me this was what I'd be buying into." Elizabeth surveyed the land. "Evan, this place isn't just wild. It's a breeding ground for these things. You can't just wipe them out. You're going to stir up something much bigger." It was too late for warnings. The alien ecosystem of Kazanine was in turmoil. The creatures had begun to show signs of aggression toward the nearby colonies, an entire settlement of peace-loving species who had thought the swamp was a dead zone. When Evan killed one of the largest predators, he inadvertently triggered a chain of events that saw the creatures seeking vengeance. By the time the intergalactic military arrived, Evan was already entrenched in a war he hadn't planned on starting. The creatures of Kazainan, emboldened by their newfound aggression, began attacking nearby settlements. They were fast, deadly, and relentless. The planet was soon embroiled in a full-scale war that would spread across the system, with forces from every corner of the galaxy converging to end what had begun as a single man's fight for peace. Elizabeth and Evan stood side by side as the battle raged around them. The swamp was no longer just a land to cultivate. It had become the front line of a war. "We didn't start this, Evan," Elizabeth said, her voice grim. "I know," Evan replied, his eyes hard, "but now we're going to finish it." In the end, the war for Kazanine would be one for the history books. A human veteran's impulsive decision to buy a piece of alien land for pennies would trigger a conflict that none had seen coming. But for Evan, the battle was not just about survival anymore. It was about proving that even in the darkest of swamps, humanity could rise above, face the beasts, and win.